Hi, my name is Chris, and this is Light Inspiration. So I'm continuing work on my next personal project, which is a little treasure chest that opens and closes itself when you walk by it, which is also going to be the basis for a couple of different projects going forward from there. So in the last video, I showed a small sketch of what I was working on, but I wanted to show a little bit of a larger one that I drew up a while ago. So I'm going for this idea right now, which is just a box that is able to open itself, triggered by an ultrasonic sensor, and then maybe putting a little demon on the inside that will open up the chest and light up eyes. There's a couple of different ideas that I had. These are from back when I had access to a laser cutter, RIP Tech Shop. But now now I'm gonna try and handle it with 3D printing. So we'll see how it goes. So the part that I wanted to do a video on today was actually creating this. So this is the mount that I'm going to use for the Adafruit feather that will drive this project. And one of the things I wanted was to create capture nuts for mounting the feather on, because I imagine that I'm probably going to take this feather off and use it for a different project and want to put it back on. So rather than cutting the machine screws or wood screws into plastic, which is going to degrade over time, or tapping screws in here, I just wanted to stop the 3D printer part of the way through, drop the nuts in place, and then let the 3D printer finish so that I can come through later and then screw the feather to the mount with just machine screws, and then it'll be metal gripping into metal. This is actually the first one that I did, and you could probably, let's see, you can see the machine screws are already captured in there. I did this one and then realized, oh wait a minute, I used the wrong nut size. The upside about 3D printing is that I could just break this apart, grab the nuts, and then throw this into the recycle heap. So I'm going to go through and show in Fusion 360 how I actually cut the holes for this, and then in Slicer how we can determine where to stop it, and then using a different software to actually editing the G-code so that the 3D printer will stop, and then we can drop the nuts in, let it finish, call it a day. So let's get into the tutorial. So here's the feather mount that I've gone through and designed. Right now it is the standoffs for the mounting screws for the feather itself, and then a couple of holes so that I can mount the mount to the inside of the treasure chest. So what I want to go through here and do now is to put some capture nuts on the inside of these standoffs, so that whenever I screw the feather to the mount, I'm actually screwing the metal machine nut into, or the metal machine screw into a metal machine nut, instead of screwing directly into the plastic, which is going to degrade over time. Because I imagine that I'll probably take this feather off, use it for something else, put it back on later, and I don't want to have to print a new mount every time I do that. So I've already done this. I've already gone through and done a capture nut for one of the standoffs so far. So if I turn down the opacity on the mount itself, we could see that there's already a cavity in there for a capture nut, and the nut's already in there too. So if I turn on a section analysis here, we could see the nut itself, and then the cavity that I punched out for it. So I'm going to go through and do that for one of the other mounts and show you step by step how I did it. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually insert a model of the nut that I'm going to use to punch the hole out. And I'm going to do this by inserting it from the McMaster-Carr catalog. So McMaster-Carr has this, there's this really nice integration into their parts catalog, which is really convenient because a lot of the parts already have 3D models built out for them, so that you could just insert them directly into your design. So I actually ordered the nuts I'm going to be using in a different project, so I already have the part number for the nut that I want. But if you were just going through and trying to feel out your project and wanted to come through and say, okay, well, I want a square nut, I want it to be a metric, and you could step through here, try to find the part that you want to insert, and then most of these, if you click on the part part number in the list and then go to product details, if you scroll to the bottom, there'll be a 3D model that you can insert from directly from the catalog in a variety of different formats. So if I wanted to insert this square nut, I could go through, say, save. It would add that square nut to my project. I would get the part number so I could turn around and order it. And I believe you could actually order directly from the insert catalog if you really wanted to. But now I could start using this model for the design. So I'm going to cancel because this isn't the nut that I want. And I'm going to grab the name of this part, go to the catalog. If you already know your part number, you could just do a search for it. It'll pop open the exact nut, part number, and again, I can go to the bottom and hit the save button. So I insert a 3D step format. I don't really have a fantastic reason other than Lars Christensen inserts it that way, and he knows way more about Fusion. I believe that Fusion will handle a number of different formats. So now that I've got this nut in, I want to position it exactly where I want it so that I can use it to cut into the model. So you could do this by aligning the nut to the model itself, but really I want that nut to stay there permanently. So instead of using a line, I'm going to use a joint. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and continue. Continue didn't capture the position, so it just puts it back where the nut was originally inserted, which is fine. So I'm going to come over to the bottom part of the nut, and I want to grab this center plus sign here. And you'll see that whenever I try and hover over it, because there's a cavity, it's trying to grab some of the faces on the inside. The way to grab the center is to hover over one of the flat parts of the nut on the very outside, and then on Mac, hold down Command. I imagine it's Control on Windows, and that will lock you into that particular face. So now I can come through and click on the exact center of that nut. And then once I'm in here, I don't want to joint it to the very front of the standoff. I actually want to joint it to the inside of the standoff. So I'll click on that. And I'm going to use a rigid joint because I don't want it to move. And we can rotate and check it out before we start doing the cutting. And that looks like exactly what I want. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. So now that we've got that nut inserted, we actually have to cut the body of our feather mount to make room for the nut itself. So I'll do that by temporarily hiding the body of the feather mount, and I want to create a plane so that I could sketch around this nut and use it for some of the dimensions. But I don't, and I also. So you could do this a number of different ways. You can either do a sketch on the top of the nut and then just extrude down. One of the ways I've been doing it for these so that I could get a little bit of an offset that I can adjust later is to actually put a mid plane on the nut. So I'll come up to construction planes, click on mid plane, and mid plane wants you to select two faces, and then it'll put a plane in between them right in the middle. So I'll select the top and the bottom, and I get my plane. So now that I have the plane that I want to sketch on, I'm going to hide the nut for a moment and create a sketch. Let's bring the nut back. So from here, you could either do a projection. So if I hit P on my keyboard, I could project the geometry and go through and select each of the lines here and then use that to draw the face. Or I can come through, a little bit quicker method is to use the polygon tool from the sketch menu. So I'll grab polygon, start at the very center of the nut, and I'll just pull it out to an arbitrary length and then constrain it later. So I'll do a coincidence point for one of the points here, to one of the points there, and now I've got my polygon directly over the nut. So I know that because of 3D printing tolerances, it's not going to be this exact size. So I'm going to do an offset line around the perimeter and make it a 0.3 offset. This you may want to adjust, and you could pull it out to a user parameter if you feel like if you want to adjust it after the fact. But in this particular case, I'm doing prototyping already, so I'm just gonna set at 0.3, and then if that's not enough, I'll come back and maybe pull it out to a user parameter later. So, but for the moment, it's good. So Now that we've got our sketch of the nut and we've got our offset to account for our 3D printer's tolerance, we actually need to go through and cut this into the feather mount itself. So the way that I'll do that is I'll come through, hit Q to press pull, and grab both parts of the profile. So we're going to cut this into the body of the mount, but something to notice before we do that cut is that, we check out the bottom. So we're not at the very bottom, or we're not cutting right where the standoff meets the body of the mount, and that's intentional. So that's because we mid-planed in the middle of the nut instead of sketching on the bottom face and then pulling up. And I did that because I want to be, instead of starting at the bottom and then pulling up to cut, I wanted to switch this to symmetrical so that we can start in the middle, cut as much as we want, and then add that little bit of tolerance on either side. That 0.3 that we did for the perimeter, do the same here, so that whenever we're printing, we get a little bit of wiggle room as we drop the nut in. So I've got the cut pulled up, and actually let me hide the body again and show our nut so that we can pull out to the top of the face of the nut, and then add 0.3. Once we click OK, actually one thing to do before we click OK, whenever we're cutting, in this case, we're cutting into the body of the feather mount, but we're also cutting into the nut itself. And it doesn't really matter in this particular case as far as the model goes, because all we care about is the cavity whenever we're exporting, but it's kind of nice to know that you can come through here whenever you're doing a cut, and where it says objects to cut through, we can uncheck the nut so that we're cutting the cavity around it, we're not removing the nut itself. So we can click OK, and now we have our nut, we have our standoff, and if we drop the opacity again, we have our cavity. So from here, we can do the next step, which is sending it out to the slicer. So one more thing before we actually go through and send this out to the slicer, we have to get the cavity that we cut for the nut over to the other standoff. It would be bad to go through and print this when only half of this is actually done. So rather than going through the same steps I just went through to insert the nut, to joint it up, to cut the hole, etc., I will just go through and mirror this feature over to the standoff, and I'll do it for the one up here too. I did these two separate because the mount vertically is actually not symmetrical, so I can't just do a mirror across the origin point of the feather mount for both of these sides. I have to do them separately. So to do the mirror in the modeling environment, not in the sketch, in the modeling environment, I'll go up here and select mirror. And I want to mirror the feature itself. It's not actually a face or a body. And something that threw me whenever I first started using the mirror feature at the modeling level is that you can't click out here. With face and bodies, you can actually come through and actually click on what you want to mirror. But for features, you have to come down to the timeline and actually select the feature you want to mirror. So I'll select that hole, I will select this other hole that we want to cut, and then I will select the plane that we want to mirror it across. So we'll get that little shadowy preview, and I'm going to switch it to optimize. Every once in a while, if you leave it on adjust, you'll mirror and you'll see the preview, but for some reason it won't actually do the cut. And I found that whenever I switch it to optimize, it will do the cut. So now we've got all of our cavities. I'll turn on this section analysis so that we can see all of our cavities, the two nuts, and now we're ready to actually send it out to the slicer. So I'm going to hit make. We'll grab the feather mount. Something to note is that whenever you click on the feather mount, you don't actually have to hide the nut components in here. You can only export one body at a time. So we're only exporting the mounts at the moment. So I'll hit OK, and I'll save this as the new feather mount model that we're going to slice. Go ahead and replace the old one. and then I'll switch over to Slicer. So I have another model in here that I'm already going to go through and print, so I'll just add this new mount to the build plate and arrange it. Okay, so now we're good to go. So from here, we could go through and do our normal slicing and checking and stuff like that. But if we just export the G code at this point and didn't do anything else to it, we wouldn't actually be able to stop and insert our nuts. Our printer would just keep going. So the way that you, at least the way that I understand how to do it, is to find the level where you want the printer to stop. And then at this level, at 5.3 millimeters high, we want to give the printer instructions to pause here so that we can do something else. So the way that I know how to do this is to use the color change app for the Prusa printers. There has to be a different way of doing this without having to basically fake a color change. I just don't know how. If someone else knows how and wants to let me know, please leave a comment. I would greatly appreciate it. So for now, I'm going to export the G code. I'll drop it in here. And then I will bring up, and then I'll open the website that I can add in the color change commands. So let me switch over to Chrome and go to the color change website. So this is a section of the Prusa Printers website that is specifically talking about color changing. There is a 3D color change native app that comes with the drivers for all the Prusa Printer software, but whenever I try to run this on my Mac, it doesn't run. It either won't open correctly, or when you try to add a G code to it, it crashes. But there is a web interface for it. So I'll come down to this section and hit choose file. I'll grab the mounts G code, and down here I'll tell it to add a color change. So if we switch back to Slicer, remember we actually want to stop at level. See, we want to stop right at the last level before it puts on that first top layer. So 5.3. And in this particular case, that's all we need to do, so we'll go ahead and download the G code, and then this one is what we'll send to our printer. So something else to mention back in the Slicer, the reason why I stop right before it puts on the top level rather than stopping somewhere down here, like I could see you thinking, oh well, now that the standoffs are to this level, there's more than enough room to drop the nut, and the nut won't shift around or anything like that. But similar to metal milling, like with the 3D printer, you have to worry about the hardware. You have to worry about the nozzle. So if we stop here and drop the nut in, then the 3D printer still has to print a whole bunch of parameter around that nut, where maybe the nozzle is going to travel and accidentally hit part of the nut and either knock the nut out or damage nozzle or something like that. So rather than stopping here, we want to make sure that the nozzle is going to completely clear the metal part that we're about to drop in. So that's why we picked the 5.3 here. It's something that I've luckily had a heads up from a friend who does metal machining, and thought about that whenever it applied to the 3D printer. So I've not crashed ahead into a nut that I've tried to drop into a print. But hopefully this is a heads up for you, just in case you're trying this, to make sure that you don't hit your nozzle. Okay. So here is where we can go through and actually insert the nuts. So the printer has stopped for the color change, and we're not changing colors, but we can go through and drop in the hardware and then start it back up in just a moment. So I'm going to grab the nuts and let the printer do the color change. So even though we're not switching out the color, it's good to go through and pull out the pull out the filament, clip it, and get ready to put it back in. That way it doesn't just bake in the nozzle and cause a little bit of a jam. So now I can reach in and drop each of these nuts in place. So, and because we stopped at the very top right before it puts on the top layer, we don't have to worry about the nuts hitting the nozzle. There's actually, you could see some of that 0.3 millimeter overhang. So all of them are in place. They're all dropped down low. So whenever we hit the start button back up, it'll just start printing over top of it. So I'll go ahead and tell the printer to put in the new filament. So, and something that's nice about doing this pausing here, that is a little bit different from whenever you're doing a multi print on a single extruder, is that I can run both of these parts at the same time, and I'm not going to mess up the other part by doing a color change. Like in this case, they're both going to be on the inside of a box, so it doesn't matter what color they are. But now both of them will have the red filament, and you won't be able to tell that there was a color change in between. So with the color change, I'll go ahead and hit OK. And we'll start where it left off. And that's it for this part. I already know that I'm going to have to come back here because I saw that a couple of the screw holes didn't line up the way that I wanted them to, so I'm going to have to do some remeasuring and readjusting, but the general concept of the capture screws was hopefully proven out by this video. I know I didn't go super in-depth into how I'm using Fusion 360, mostly because I'm still learning it and I'm not really the best at it, but hopefully the stuff that I showed will help you dive through and figure out how to build the various things that you're building. So I've got this part to build, a couple of other mounts to finish building, and then eventually it'll all go into this box. So that it currently has a bunch of toys in it that I printed for kids in the office and my daughter. But then eventually we'll have a little demon that opens it up, and then you know, if you can get past the demon, then you can grab a toy. So, but that's it. So I hope that provided you some light inspiration.